The city outside was humming. The steady buzz of traffic, distant sirens, and the low throb of music spilling from a passing car. In the middle of it all, on the 10th floor of a modest building in Queens, a 70-year-old woman sat quietly in her living room. The walls were bare now, the shelves empty, the scent of lemon polish hanging in the air. It was the smell of endings. "Why'd you sell the apartment without me? My wife and I had plans." Daniel's voice cut through the air, echoing slightly off the hollow walls. Auntie Miriam didn't look up right away. She sat with her hands folded, her fingers thin and still. "I didn't sell your apartment, Daniel," she said softly. "I sold mine." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Mum, that place was family. You promised you'd never sell it." "I promised your father I'd take care of it," she said. "And I did, for 45 years. Outside, the late afternoon light spilled across the faded parquet floors. Miriam's eyes lingered on the space where the old couch used to sit, where her husband, Eli, would read the newspaper and grumble about the Yankees. She could still hear his laughter sometimes when the window was open just right. But it wasn't enough anymore. The apartment felt like a shell, a museum of a life long gone. When Eli died, she'd stayed out of habit. The walls held their history, but the world outside had moved on. New neighbors, new stores, new noise. Daniel had his own life in Brooklyn now, and his wife Amira kept hinting that they should turn the old place into something useful. Maybe a rental, or an Airbnb. Miriam had smiled at the idea but said nothing. A month later she sold the place, quietly, quickly. Now, her son stood there staring at her as if she'd burned down a monument. "We could have renovated it, Mom." Amira had plans for a home office. "We were going to keep it in the family." "I know," Miriam said gently, "but I didn't need a home office. I needed peace." He frowned. "Peace doesn't come from selling the one thing Dad loved." "No," she said, "but neither does loneliness." Daniel looked at her then, really looked, and saw the deep exhaustion in her face. For the first time, he noticed the cane leaning against the table, the slight tremor in her hands. He'd been so busy planning what he wanted that he hadn't seen what she was losing. He didn't know that Miriam had already signed the papers to move into a small senior housing community in upstate New York. She'd visited twice. Quiet gardens, shared meals, laughter. For the first time in years, she'd felt like she could breathe. She hadn't told Daniel because she knew he'd argue, tell her she was too old to start over, that she should stay where she was. But staying had started to feel like dying slowly. When Daniel left that day, he didn't hug her. He closed the door harder than he meant to, and she sat there in the empty apartment until the light faded, remembering the echo of the slam more than his words. Weeks passed. Miriam packed what little she wanted. Books, old photographs, her tea kettle. The movers came and went. She watched New York shrink through the back window of a cab, feeling both heartbreak and relief. In her new home, mornings were quiet in a different way. Birds instead of traffic. She joined a small gardening group. She made a friend, Nora, a retired nurse who told funny stories about her wild youth in the 70s. For the first time in a long time, Miriam found herself laughing. Then, one Saturday, a familiar knock came at her door. Daniel stood there, awkward in the hallway, holding a paper cup from the coffee shop they used to go to together. "I went by the apartment," he said softly. "The new owners painted it yellow." "That's good," she said. "It needed some light." He nodded. "I get it now, Mom. You didn't sell our memories. You just made room for new ones." Her eyes softened. "You always did take a while to catch up." He smiled faintly, stepping inside. They sat together at the small wooden table, sipping coffee and watching the late, spring sunlight dance across the walls. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of quiet understanding, the kind that only comes when love finally outgrows possession. Later, when he left, Miriam walked out to the garden and looked at the sky, a deep orange over the Hudson. Somewhere behind her, laughter drifted through the open windows. She smiled. The city still belonged to her, just in a different way now. Maybe home wasn't a place at all. Maybe it was the peace you carried with you when you finally decided to let go.